critical areas of research and controversy today, one is the brain. And when you think about food, for example, and the way we eat, you think about a continuum. You have pleasure, you have basically reward, but then you have dependence. Do you have addiction? And that's one of the issues which is coming up as people can, through neuroimaging techniques, can take a look at the brain and centers of the brain that light up and say, hey, you know, cocaine has the same effect as eating a piece of chocolate. Now, we know that is not the case, but we're not sophisticated enough to be able to basically make that distinction. We have satiety, we have evidence-based reviews, traceability. Even in GIS technology, what we are using to say that an area of the country is under, if it's particularly it plagued at this point with the overweight and obesity, they can use the GIS technology to say how many fast food establishments are there in that particular location. And that actually has resulted in zoning restrictions on fast food restaurants in Los Angeles County and some of the areas that have a particular problem with obesity. So it's not just Foursquare that's using the technology, it's essentially technology that's available for other things as well. Clearly the changing media environment, and that's been so well laid out with from the other speakers this morning, but I always like to basically say that we are moving beyond the 2.0 world. We're moving into 3.0 world. And what's at the bottom? There's been a change in that paradigm. So what you see essentially on the right-hand side of that diagram is essentially very, very different on the left-hand side, and it's been further complicated by the role of the citizen journalist. And yes, people are shouting these things from the rooftop, as Martin said earlier, to get information out. Everyone, himself or herself, are journalists. And the media is in tremendous transition. And I think the point that's most critical here is to say health, obesity, food safety are very hot issues, whether you're talking the old or the new media. Martin also referred to the Edelman Trust Barometer, and this is fundamental, I think, to understanding where we are in these issues. Basically, the most media impressions that came out of Davos this year, the World Economic Forum, was about the Edelman Trust Barometer, and said the trust in business was at its lowest level post-Enron, and that was a major scandal in the States in the late 80s. And that was across the globe. We always have said that this is something that, again, was more a European phenomenon. It is equally true in the U.S. today as well. And if you look at the slide here, you see the tremendous plummeting of trust in business. And what's happened is, however, that has led to, okay, if business can't do it, then government is held most responsible for these issues. That, again, is a huge shift in the United States. Now, I may point out that this has changed. They've actually done an update to the Edelman Trust Barometer in the summer and found that in the euphoria following the Obama election in the U.S., we had such faith that there would be a rapid change. Yes, we can, was the slogan. Well, we found that given the political realities in the states, that sometimes we can't, or at least we can't as rapidly as we would like to see. For those of you who follow the headlines in the states, that we had 2 gubernatorial races open yesterday, and both governors came from the Republican Party, not the Democratic Party. So it'll be interesting to see how this portends. But nonetheless, it did for a long time give a real euphoria about government. And then this cartoon, I think, picks it up very well. Stop, wait. Government's no longer the problem, it's the solution. Well, there's a new sheriff in town, and I'm going to come back to that, and that's the R-word, regulation in the states. And again, I think this has huge global implications as well, because certain of the approaches have been tried in other parts of the world. We're picking them up, we're exporting others, so you're seeing, again, a real sameness in the way the issues are being debated and potentially even addressed. As I said, obesity is the lens through which all nutrition issues are viewed, and there's a reason for this. I can't see all of you in the audience, but I'd like to see a show of hands. How many have seen these maps before? Any of you? Well, if you were a U.S. audience, you would have seen these at virtually every meeting for the last 5 years. These are from our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and these are the behavioral risk factor trends showing the rates of obesity and overweight in the United States. And back in 1990, we didn't have a single state that had an obesity problem of anywhere near 20%. Then you look basically at 1998, which is the dark blue states. That's what happened between 90 and 98. Now you look at 2007, we only have one state which doesn't have an obesity problem of 20 to 25%. So it is a staggering change. Our genes have not changed that much in a 10-year period, or 20-year period in this case. So something else is going on, and that's why all of these environmental issues are essentially cropping up. There are parallel rises in many of the chronic health disease. By the way, the cost in the U.S. came out from CDC again. The cost of treating overweight and obesity in the U.S. is $147 billion a year. Now that is what's gotten the policymakers' attention and the political leaders' attention. And one of the most important is the rise in diabetes. Again, it's a parallel rise between obesity and diabetes. We now have a significant problem with so-called type 2 diabetes in children. That was adult onset. It isn't anymore in the States. It's showing up with kids as young as 5 years old. The risk of diabetes today, males in the U.S., if you were born in 2000, 1 in 3, females 2 in 5, and if you're Hispanic, 1 in 2. So you think about the health care costs, as this is such a debilitating disease over a period of time. But take a look at the global prevalence of obesity. As you see in the same colors, you see the parts of Europe that are uniquely vulnerable. Throughout North America, South America, Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, it's real. It's real, and it's coming even in parts of Africa. This is coming up. And then these are the obesity rates, where you have a body mass index of over 30. And then just take a look. This is the diabetes issue in Southeast Asia, 73% increase in just a very, very short period of time, projected by 2025. And again, the cost factors for an area which is struggling already with its economic picture. And again, in other countries in Asia, looking at a 48% increase in cost. And then you have to pair that. If you're thinking about this in an intelligent way, you back up and you say, okay, this is a complex illness. But look at the total calories per day that are available essentially for people to eat around the world, and that's why the pressure gets put back on the food industry as such. And in terms of global media trends, this is the old organization of which I was CEO for many years, the International Food Information Council. We started saying that obesity was going to be a major problem in the late 90s, so we started monitoring the media, English-speaking media. We've never seen a story over a period of time, through economic crises, through wars, through campaigns and elections, that's had the staying power this is, and that's because it's such a complex issue that it has many hooks. You can come up with a new angle on the obesity story any given day and cover it as such. The other thing, it's highly visual. So you can take a camera crew or your iPhone and you can put something up in no time at all that you see the individuals on the street corners of virtually any city in the world. And where it's most vulnerable at this point, and this is the fairy tale that everyone around the world knows, this Hansel and Gretel. Remember when we used to have to fatten the kids up first? Adults make choices. They're responsible for their behaviors. Kids are uniquely vulnerable, and that's where you have victims and that's where you have villains. And kids are getting fatter. This is the U.S. map, but it is true essentially in most of the countries you've seen. And what's happening in the U.S., and we're hearing happening now in other parts of the world, is that obesity is being linked to smoking. In this case, secondhand smoke. This quote from the British Medical Journal, teen obesity is as deadly as smoking. Just some examples, and keep this in mind because, as I said earlier, there's a new sheriff in town, the R word, and you'll see how this is playing out. Now, the World Health Organization had its famous, or depending on one's perspective, infamous global strategy that came out in 2004. And basically, it was very, very well grounded and very thoughtful and represents the public health thinking behind, and as well as a recognition of the cost that to all of the countries as they deal with their health care issues. But you see the main sort of aspects of WHO. But when it comes basically to food, these are some of the things that were listed as sort of responsibilities of the broad agriculture and food industry on product reformulation, shift in overall product portfolio. Then you get down basically to prevention and codes and whatever relating to marketing and advertising. And this has picked up over time a lot of steam, and it will impact marketing and many of these health and food issues over time.